The NFL playoffs are almost here. The regular fantasy football season is almost over. But that doesn't mean the best ball season is over, because maybe the greatest best ball game in existence, playoff best ball for the NFL, is here. And before we dive into tons of drafts and start really hammering teams out and picking players that we love, teams that we love for the NFL playoffs, we need to figure out our strategy, where we're going to get an edge, and how we're going to take down these playoff best ball tournaments on Underdog Fantasy. I know that many people are probably still sweating the regular season best ball teams, the regular season fantasy football championships, but playoff best ball will be here in just a couple of weeks. Before we know it, the NFL playoffs will be here. And so we got to keep moving along to the next. Best ball season never stops, 24/7, 365. And I am excited to start to talk through the playoff best ball stuff because, as Josh says, let's go, baby, hit that like. I am also pumped. I've really started hitting the playoff best ball drafts recently and starting to really formulate some ways, some strategies that I think we can use to win. Again, specifically on Underdog. We will get to the other sites at a later date, maybe tomorrow, maybe the beginning of next week. We will be hitting every single possible tournament you can play from a strategic sense, with shows and with content on Spike Week. If you have not signed up for Underdog, what are you doing? But you see in the upper right-hand corner of your screen, if you use promo code SPIKE at Underdog, you get a 100% deposit bonus up to $100. So maybe you didn't dive into some best ball regular season teams, you just hadn't heard about it, or you weren't ready to dive into the best ball mania streets or anything like that. Playoff best ball is such a fun, crazy, strategic game. I highly recommend it. Go ahead and sign up. However, with playoff best ball, I think it's really, really important to be really thoughtful about your strategy. And that's why we're having this show here today, because it is such a different game. I think even myself will get caught up not totally understanding as I complete my drafts. It's things that even the sharpest best ball players, not myself, even the sharpest best ball players out there on the planet, know inherently the rules, the details, how you might go about winning these playoff best ball tournaments. But when you get into a draft, it is far more difficult to implement successful strategies in playoff best ball in that draft room than it is in a regular season best ball draft. Think about a regular season best ball draft. You draft in June, July, whatever. If you wanted to stack the Bengals, you got Jamar Chase, you're waiting on Joe Burrow, you don't get Joe Burrow. Are you maybe disappointed? Sure. Is your team really that much drastically different? Not really. You can probably, if you really want to have a stack on that team, you can find another stack that's available. And really, even if you don't have specific stacks, it's okay in the regular season best ball. Maybe not perfect, but your team is just as live as any other team, even when things don't fall together for you in that draft. In playoff best ball, this format is so unique and so specific that some of these things we're going to talk about today are like of extreme hyper importance, way more so than any other format. You truly almost can't totally screw up a regular season draft in really any sport, assuming you set some kind of positional limits. So where you don't take 8 quarterbacks, you really can't screw it up. In playoff best ball, you could screw up the team 3 picks in. You could draft teams that are absolutely paying the rake, that are punting off your $5 or $25. And it's actually pretty easy to draft teams that are totally drawing dead right off the jump. So before we get into it, this I totally agree with. Kind of what I was talking about. Lundar says, it took a while to get my brain into kind of the playoff best ball mindset. My first few drafts were hideous. That is one thing before we start to dive into some of the specifics. maybe even more so than regular season best ball, I think reps are going to be very important for most people. So I love that sites like Underdog, who we're talking about today, have a $5 tournament out there, so anyone can get, don't go get Starbucks that morning. Don't go get your coffee. Don't have McDonald's for lunch, right? As I believe Josh Norris says, skip the guac at lunch. Take your $5 and you can put it into these tournaments and get a few reps in, and you'll see what we're talking about here. As Paul says, these drafts are very unforgiving. Unforgiving is the perfect word. You can go from a team that you loved to a team that is completely stone cold, dead, buried very, very quickly if things don't go your way. First, before we get into any super, specific details, I want to, I have what I would call the 5 key points, and they're probably not what you would think, that the 5 key points to Underdog playoff best ball strategy. I'm not going to sit here and bore you with, here's what stacking is, and here's what roster construction is. If you would like to get some specifics on, what is stacking, why is stacking important, we have, shortly after this, I have our top stacks for playoff best ball tournaments coming out on Spike Week. We already have our core picks and our rankings for playoff best ball, both out on Spike Week, both completely free. So go to spikeweek.com if you want to get, some general rankings, right? And our rankings are definitely very different than the ADP. You'll see that once you pull those up. You'll see our top, our core players that we're really honed in on drafting, and you'll see top stacks. You're going to see, if you really want that player specific stuff or some general guidelines on stacking, we have that for you in written form. But I don't want to kind of do the generic, here's how you stack, and here, you need to have this many running backs and this many wide receivers, because I don't think that that's super helpful actually in this format. In the regular, again, it's so different in the regular season format. We do want to talk, do we take 2 quarterbacks or do we take 3? Do we take 2 tight ends or do we take 1 tight end, right? How do we construct our team in terms of how many positions, right? Do I need to stack? Do I not need to stack? This game is so drastically different. This is much more so of a futures betting market that we happen to use players as the chess pieces involved instead of, like a betting slip. It's just so different that I don't want to go into those cookie cutter roster construction ideas. So when we first start and we say, what is this format? What is playoff best ball? We've kind of talked about it a little bit, right? But in a super nutshell, very oversimplified, you draft teams of players, the goal being to advance each step of the actual NFL playoffs, just like you would in your regular season best ball playoffs. So you got to win your, you got to win your fantasy football league to make the playoffs, right? Well, we've already entered the playoffs. I play against the other 5 people in my draft on Underdog. The drafts are 6-person drafts. I need to beat either all 5 of the other teams in my draft or 4 of the other teams in my draft, depending upon the contest, which we will get to that. I need to beat either 4 or 5 of the other people in my 6-person group to advance to the next round. But different than your regular season, right? I carry all my players over, assuming they're not injured. Shout out Derrick Henry and Tony Pollard. Assuming they're not injured, I carry all my players over into the second round of the playoffs. I have my team still, right? But in the playoffs, teams get knocked out in the wild card round, right? You draft Buccaneers players this year. I'll use them because they stink. You draft the Buccaneers this year and they get knocked out by whoever, San Francisco or something in the first round. Those players, you don't get to replace them. There's no waiver wire. Chris Godwin's on your team for the rest of this tournament, whether he plays 1 game or he makes the Super Bowl. So obviously what you need to do is find this blend of the dream, right? Is to have, as many players as possible once we had continued to advance into the Super Bowl, right? This whole tournament ends in the Super Bowl. We keep advancing until we get to that Super Bowl round. and we're playing against all these other teams that advanced each round, got to keep winning till we get to that Super Bowl. Then that's where all the money is. The Super Bowl is the week 17 of the playoffs. You can make a few bucks before you reach that final round, but where you're actually going to make any substantial money is by getting a team to the Super Bowl and performing well in that Super Bowl. So you'll hear tons of conversations about how important, right, your lineup being live in the Super Bowl. Now, you draft 10 players on Underdog, but you only need to fill 5 roster spots, right? So a quarterback, and we'll probably pull this up in a second, a quarterback, a running back, 2 wide receivers, and a flex, right? I can actually go ahead and pull that up right away. If we go to the Underdog Lobby, gosh dang it. Darn StreamYard, not quite cooperating. If we go to the Underdog Lobby and I click on Mitten 2, right? Again, you will see there's 4 rounds, the 4th being the championship, the Super Bowl. Draft size of 6, 10 draft rounds. So we draft 10 players. But if you look here, obviously no one is going to be complaining about, turning $5 into $300. That's amazing. That's awesome. But if you really want to get, we're playing, the whole reason we're playing this is because, look, there's 50,000, 25,000, 15,000, 10,000, right? We want to give ourselves the best shot as possible at taking home the big bucks, right? That's why we're playing it. So you see here the schedule, you see here the scoring, you see here the roster. 1 quarterback, 1 running back, tight ends and wide receivers are the same thing. So Travis Kelce versus Justin Jefferson, no difference. I need 2 of them, and I need a flex to fill out my starting lineup. 5 players will not make my starting lineup each time, each week, each round. So theoretically, the whole goal is to keep advancing through this insane contest against other teams who probably have some similar players to you because they advanced, right? There's not that many awesome scores in a playoff round. You keep advancing against other advancing teams. And then what's even the most important is you reach the final round, the Super Bowl, and you need to have a team that can win. You need to think about tons of different things, but the most important element is I better have 5 guys that can score, that can fill out my lineup in that Super Bowl. That's the bare minimum, right, in terms of strategic analysis for these tournaments. So that kind of covers, generally speaking, the playoff best ball format. Of course, if you have questions, please feel free to drop them in the chat. I am going to go really quickly back to our little handy dandy playoff best ball. The second thing, to piggyback on what the format is, you see it says the contest details. They're very different. It's generally just the advancement structure. And what I mean by that is how many teams out of the group that you're in each playoff round advance. And it's also mostly the first round where that is changed. Sometimes Underdog will launch tournaments where they don't change the amount of rounds, they don't change anything except the advancement structure and maybe the pay, the payout structure, the pay scale. But they will change it from, and this is huge, right? You're doubling the amount of teams that can advance and really making it much more easy to get out of the first round. But they will take you from 1 out of 6 teams in your group advance to the second round to 2 out of 6 advance in the second round. The other thing that this will often do is create a larger final group in the Super Bowl. The more people that advance each round, the more people are going to make the Super Bowl if they don't make the pools bigger in the second and the third round. So you get 2 elements of the contest details that become very important whether we are drafting in a 1 out of 6 advance in the first round or a 2 out of 6 advance in the first round. So when you go to pick one of these tournaments to start drafting in, make sure you understand those details. It's generally just that. The format doesn't change. Like I said, scoring doesn't change, right? Your roster doesn't change. None of that. The players' positions don't change. None of that changes. But the details about how many advance from each round are critical in how you draft. We'll get into a lot of the specifics beneath as to maybe some ways that you can manipulate those things. But the very first like super high level, not a total catch-all, but we'll call it a catch-all close enough, is the easier it is to advance, the kind of riskier and crazier I can be. Now, you're going to lose teams by taking a riskier route, but we don't make any money in this until we advance at least multiple rounds. And typically, like I said, to the finals. You need to make the finals to turn even your $5 into anything you care about. And what I would say is, okay, $100, turning $5 into $100 is different for every single person. Some people may not care about that. Some people, that may be huge for them. The problem is, if turning $5 into $100 is a big deal for you, I don't think that this is the game. This is the way you should be putting your $5 in to hope to turn into 100. I mean, there's really no good ways to do that, period. But if you're relying upon, doubling your money, this is not doubling your money, even tripling your money. This is probably not the format for you. Of course, no one's setting out to lose money, but you need this contest, this format specifically. You have to play to win, to finish high. You have to. There's at best only 33% advance from that first round. Those 33% that advance still really don't make money. Sometimes you'll just get your money back advancing out of that first round. Then there's 11% rake, right? Meaning 11% goes to Underdog of the prize pool, of the entry fees, not of the prize pool, of the entry fees goes to Underdog. So you absolutely need to advance to make any sort of money, even just profit, right? Even just profit. And so you have to play to win these things. It's very important that we get that out there. And when we talked about the format, when we talked about the contest details, it is very important. So when people will say, I got a comment on Twitter that someone said, people might be playing it too risky. There is, of course, different ways to approach the 1 versus 6 advance and the 2 versus 6 advance, but I don't want to say it's not possible to play it too risky, but I think most people probably default to the not playing it risky enough. If I were to guess the manner in which the field plays, they care too much about advancing out of that first round and not enough about where your actual value lies, where your potential actual ROI comes from. And it's basically from making the Super Bowl. Right. And then your real EV comes in from making the Super Bowl with a unique high leverage team, which again, we'll get to some of that here in a little bit. Quick, some good comments. Johnny Football says, practice on the $5 and then tackle the higher limits. Yeah, you also can just stick to the $5. I agree. If you want to move up to the Gauntlet or something like that, Gauntlet is the Underdog $25 playoff best ball tournament. And the Mitten, which we were just looking at, is a $5 playoff best ball tournament. But yes, I would recommend, before you start to get into the Gauntlet, I would recommend tackling some $5 drafts. 2, other Eric, always so many Erics. It has died down a little bit during the season. Some less Erics that are watching. Shout out to the Eric gang. But Eric says, in Underdog, I think you can blow your draft taking too many bye week guys. You definitely can. I mean, there's really no way around that. If you take 5 bye week players, that means the 5 other guys are the only guys you can count their score in the first round, right? And we'll get to the bye week thing here in just a second. But you can easily blow it, but you can also easily completely blow the entire playoff setting if you just say, I'm not going to take those bye week guys because, right, I got to get out of the first round. It doesn't matter, I'll just play for last year's Super Bowl, right? Wildcard teams. That is, of course, a path. But what if the Chiefs get the bye and the Eagles get the bye and they play in the Super Bowl? You better have 5 of them on your team at a minimum of 4, depending upon how many other people have them, right? This is the thing about this format, to the very top bullet point, that is so fascinating. If you have to figure out a way to blend the highest possible probability Super Bowls with some more off the beaten path possible Super Bowls, kind of like we saw last year, and balance all these things and see what the best way to win the tournament is. Not even just, right? It's not about just advancing. It's not even about just making the Super Bowl. It's about how do I win this tournament? And there's always going to be a push and pull, or as GA says, Peter Overzet said, 4 Eagles would be a tough needle to thread. Well, of course it would. Of course it's a tough needle to thread. You just put 40% of your roster you're not going to use in the first round, and you got to beat 5 other teams to get there. Totally agree. However, if we reach the Super Bowl, and again, it's Eagles Chiefs, and they both get the bye, you got to try to thread some needles, right? You can't just say, well, I'm just going to not worry about the Super Bowl of the bye week. I mean, you can. That is a strategy. One I actually like a lot of the times, which we'll get to. But you also have to be cognizant of the fact that you are writing off the highest probability Super Bowl and saying, well, not going to draft any teams for this outcome, even though it is the highest probability. Now, we'll get to in these next couple bullet points. If you believe that your opponents are doing that too much, then the best way to win the tournament could be going elsewhere. But that's the thing. Those are the things that we need to figure out, right? In regular season best ball, we're figuring out, is this guy overpriced? Is this guy underpriced? How many running backs should I take? Right. We're figuring out all these different things. In this, it is so drastically different. We really need to understand what our opponents are building for. What scenarios are they building for? Because it's all a scenario-based situation, right? We have to nail a parlay of NFL futures within the construct of it being 10 players, if that makes sense. I need multiple of these teams to keep advancing. And then, even last year, you could have got knocked out without Gabe Davis. You could have had a Bengals-Rams team that covered you in the Super Bowl that was really plus EV, but Gabe Davis knocked you out, right, with the 4-touchdown game. There's all these crazy elements to this game around that are so fascinating. Before I move on, I will say, Rob asks, do you think it's imperative to get one of Hurts, Allen, Mahomes, Dak, or Purdy? No, I don't. I think, generally speaking, those would be the 5 quarterbacks. I am. You're missing Burrow. So Burrow is in that for me for sure. But I would say, if I put Burrow on this list, those 6 quarterbacks are the ones I feel personally project well individually, kind of outside of Purdy, are on the teams that we want to place our chips on the most in terms of advancing throughout the playoffs and also in terms of making the Super Bowl. So I think, generally speaking, yeah, you'll see most of my teams with those 6 guys, but it doesn't always work that way, right? And maybe we'll fire up a draft at the end here in 20 minutes or so, 15 minutes. But these drafts are so funny. It doesn't always work that way, right? Plus, I will say, I think that Herbert and the Chargers are pretty undervalued. This year in particular, he's a pretty good backstop quarterback, and I don't think it's totally crazy, if you want to do Lamar Cousins type stuff. I don't feel very good about them. I don't really want to be taking them, but you know what I mean? But that's kind of part of the point is you can't just we'll see it when we do some of the drafts. The quarterback thing is very, very fascinating, and we will discuss some of that. The third bullet point that you see here is maybe the most important thing. Yeah, this is such a good point. This is kind of how I feel about Herbert a little bit this year. Paul says Burrow was an afterthought this time last year, and now some people are calling him, the best young quarterback in the NFL. It's kind of funny. But this time last year, if you would have said, I'm just drafting, right, the highest probability quarterbacks, I'm just taking Mahomes and Allen, I think it was Dak at the time, Rodgers, right? If I'm just basing my decisions off that probability of who I think the best teams / best quarterbacks are to advance, Joe Burrow was not making your list. Matthew Stafford was not that high on that list. It was the NFC was kind of weak, so Rams got a little bit more steam. The Bengals were not expensive in these drafts, and anybody could have got Bengals Rams stacks together for the Super Bowl. It was just getting it there that was the issue, and nobody saw that coming. So again, we'll get to a lot of these different things in some of these bullet points. Get comfortable. This is like my favorite saying in like all of fantasy sports, not just it's definitely that way in DFS. It's definitely that way in regular season best ball, but in playoff best ball, more than anything, probably more than any other form of fantasy football. If you are not comfortable being uncomfortable with your teams, this is probably not the game for you. There's too much chaos, and you have to be willing, every single draft has to be willing to build something that you probably think is ridiculous. You probably think is you don't enjoy clicking. Here's a good example, piggybacking off the QB thing. Yesterday in the Discord, if you have not joined the Spike Week Discord, it is a community of thousands of absurd, sicko, amazing best ball players who are constantly talking strategy right now. Obviously, lots of talk about the best ball finals, but tons of playoff best ball strategy talk. Goes 365 days a year. It's completely free, and there's a link down in the description below to join the Discord. There was an awesome conversation about quarterbacks in playoff best ball yesterday. I think it was yesterday, 2 days ago, something like that. The days are blending together. And it was actually around Brock Purdy, because Brock Purdy is on a team that, for me, is personally my favorite team to target in all of playoff best ball, the San Francisco 49ers. Their skill position players are incredible. I think in my opinion, they're the best team right now. I'm not saying they've performed the best or been the best NFC team all season. In my personal opinion, they are the best team in the NFC right now. The defense is the best defense in the NFC. The offense is just about right there with the Eagles, definitely with the Cowboys. I think they're extremely undervalued. However, you have the fact that Brock Purdy, while being the quarterback of that team, is not a quarterback in fantasy that we're just plugging in and feeling like he's going to get me through by himself. Even if the team wins, is he going to get me through 3 rounds of this when I got to beat, not in every round, because there's obviously 2 teams that will get a bye, but I got to beat Josh Allen. I got to beat Patrick Mahomes. I got to beat Jalen Hurts, Joe Burrow, Dak Prescott, Justin Herbert, Lamar Jackson's going to make the playoffs. I got to beat all these guys. Can Purdy hang in there, right? Score 20? Sure. But it is uncomfortable to click Brock Purdy as your only quarterback, right? But the benefit is such that if Purdy can hang in there and you can continue to advance, right? You don't have to beat in the first round. You really only got to beat a couple of big quarterbacks. So people worried about the early round advance rate in the first round of Brock Purdy, even in the contest where it's 1 out of 6 advance, there's going to be 2 superstar quarterbacks on bye in that first round, right? So now you just got to beat, I keep saying that the Chiefs are going to get the bye. I probably shouldn't do that, but let's just say, for example, we'll use what I said earlier, that the Eagles and the Chiefs get the bye. Now you have Burrow and Josh Allen as the other elite fantasy quarterbacks that you have to fade with Brock Purdy. So that's only 2 teams. That's only 2 teams in your group, right? The other 2 teams are at a disadvantage because they took Hurts and they took Mahomes. So they took another quarterback, which either that quarterback isn't better than Purdy, or relatively speaking, or they took they had to use more draft capital on a quarterback position, and you have them beat at running back, wide receiver, flex, right? So really all you're doing is hoping that Brock Purdy can hang in there with the big guns in that first round. And then in the second round, it becomes crazy because we don't really know what the teams are going to look like in those follow-up rounds, right? If nobody goes nuts, Brock Purdy could be the chalkiest quarterback in the second round. We don't know. We don't know that teams are going to get through those bye week quarterbacks, right? If Jalen Hurts gets the bye and you can't sneak him in, right? You just don't have the pieces around him to sneak him into the second round. We don't know what the second round is going to look like. And so we will focus in with this Brock Purdy specific situation. This is one example of many others that are very similar to this in this format. And it is, I don't feel good about Brock Purdy being my only quarterback, So I'm going to take Trevor Lawrence. I'm going to take Lamar Jackson. I might take him with Dak Prescott. And these are not unreasonable things. This is not me saying you cannot do this. I have done it. I have taken another quarterback with Brock Purdy. I want to try these different structures out. But if your whole idea is I have to safeguard myself so that I feel comfy at each position, so that I feel comfy about how things are going to play out for me, you're probably not going to win. You can't safeguard yourself from all of the uncomfortable feelings in playoff best ball and win. You just can't. And so the next point is piggybacking on that. If you think that your team feels you drafted 10 players and you said, boom, nailed it. Let me post this on Twitter. Everybody's going to love it. That team probably sucks. Hate to tell you, if you love it, it's because we as humans see and think through this lens of what is most likely, what do we like the most? And then the outcome happens and we're like, whoop, just ran bad. Whoever could have seen that coming. When what we should do is not think about every single possible scenario that could play out, but think about the unlikely things. If you are just building for the Eagles-Chiefs Super Bowl, and it's a little different because of the bye week, right? But if you're just building the same Eagles and Chiefs Super Bowl teams, drafting all the guys who get drafted in every draft, doing the same shit that everybody else is doing in this format, playing for the same high probability outcomes, you see so much within this, if you think your team is perfect. Every playoff best ball, spreadsheet, article, everything I've seen references almost nothing except for playoff odds and Super Bowl odds, right? This team has the third best odds to win the Super Bowl. That's great. It makes for good content. Trust me, as a content creator, it's going to be discussed. But that's not really the point of the game that we're playing, because all that shit is priced in. If those were edges, like Jesus, we would all just max every one of these contests. If the market couldn't figure out who the Super Bowl favorites are, it's priced into ADP. Everybody knows that the Eagles have the best record, right? Everybody knows that the Chiefs and the Bills. You're not sneaking anything by anyone by saying, oh, well, I'm just going to build for the highest probability Super Bowl. Now, again, bye week caveat is necessary in that conversation. But if you think like, oh, look, I got the two Super Bowl favorites, I got a perfectly balanced roster. Maybe I got two quarterbacks. So, you never know what's going to happen at quarterback. I'm safeguarded everywhere, and I got the favorite Super Bowl matchup. Probably not going to work out. Like that is just how playoff football really works. And so this idea of being uncomfortable and being comfortable being uncomfortable is like maybe the most important thing. All this stuff, all this shit is way, way, way more important than we could sit here and do the, how many running backs should you draft? How many wide receivers should you draft? How many players should you include in your stack? Frankly, a lot of that is all draft dependent. And so we get to that final point. This is how are you going to win this tournament? Like specifically, how are you going to win this tournament? Right? Think about it. This is the thing about the uncomfortable stuff. You have to, there needs to be a story coming together when you draft that team that says, here's what happens and how this team wins it all. And it's not just how people will often frame that through, here's how these two teams, I'm going to get these two teams to play in the Super Bowl. And sometimes that is it, right? If you're planning for a Vikings Chargers Super Bowl and you're saying, that Super Bowl combination is underowned, which it probably is, for being honest. That Super Bowl combination is underowned relative to its potential to be the actual Super Bowl. Or just for those teams to advance further, right? Maybe one of them makes the Super Bowl and the Vikings win 2 games, right? So I have my 49ers and Chargers and Vikings combos on a team. Very unique. You can easily draft kind of just the best players from those individual teams and say, this is how I'm actually going to win the tournament, because this is going to play out in a way that very few of my opponents are drafting for, right? the result of the playoffs is something that is under-owned by my opponents, and thus, if it plays out, I have, outsized gains coming for me in my teams that drafted for that situation. And all you had to do was nail that situation, right? That's what I will say I do personally prefer. There's not one size fits all, draft strategy in these, but personally what I prefer is looking for last year's Bengals Rams. I don't want to draft the same shit that everybody is drafting. I want to draft these different matchups, right? I'm drafting. So I actually think the 49ers are very undervalued, even though CMC goes third. I think the 49ers, giving away my real hot take, right? 49ers. But I think the 49ers are very underowned. So a huge part of my current draft strategy is really trying to draft combinations of 49ers with about any scenario that can play out. I got Chargers with them. I got Ravens with them. We got Jags late in drafts with these guys. Obviously, there's tons of Bengals with them, Chiefs, Bills, whatever. But I believe that I want to, as a part of my strategy and how I'm actually going to win, is that the 49ers are undervalued. Christian McCaffrey is my 101 first overall player in these drafts for me personally. You can find the rankings. They're posted for free on spikeweek.com. I am going to shove in my chips, right? X amount of my chips in the mitten to how do I win this tournament? Be right about the 49ers, because I'm going to have every other combination covered. Now, I'm not even saying that is the right way to do it, but I'm starting with, how do I win this tournament? I'm not starting with who do I think makes the Super Bowl. I'm not starting with who do I think is how many bye week players can I draft on a team. Start with, how are you actually going to win this tournament, right? What is going to give you an edge over what your opponents are doing? It could be an individual team stack. It could be an individual roster construction, right? It could be a lot of different things. It could be those bye week guys. And I do want to talk about this really quickly, and then we'll hit some of the comments, and then we'll hop in a draft to kind of close it out. The bye week stuff, I think, is fascinating. The bye week teams could be, I don't think they are yet necessarily, because all of the bye week quarterbacks, go really early, although Hurts is starting to fall. So maybe we'll see that as an edge shortly. But there probably becomes a tipping point, which this does happen frequently in NFL playoff best ball over the cycle of the contest, that it starts out before we actually know who the bye week quarterbacks are, that, Allen, Mahomes, Hurts, AJ Brown, Travis Kelce, Stephon Diggs, they all go, in the first round, right? They all go in the first round, and they're the best picks. And you can tell yourself the story of, we don't know who's getting the bye yet, so I can just still keep drafting them in the first round. Then the buys get locked in, right? Maybe this week, certainly, obviously, in 2 weeks. Maybe something happens, right? We can tell ourselves the story. Something happened. I drafted Josh Allen 101, and the Bills did not end up getting the bye. Now I feel great. But the flip side also happens, where it starts to become obvious, or it becomes a lock, that a team gets a bye, and everybody feels uncomfortable. I do too, drafting bye week players, right? Because I have to beat 5 other teams in the first round. How do I beat them when I'm literally guaranteeing myself zeros in the first round? That's something that's uncomfortable for everyone. So in turn, there becomes a tipping point where, despite the fact that like what GA said, 4 Eagles on a team is a really tough needle to thread, there becomes a tipping point where that's still that becomes the best way to win this tournament. You say, give me my Hurts, right? AJB, Miles Sanders, Dallas Goedert team. I'm going to load up on my other 6 guys. Maybe they're all AFC, right? On the other side. And I'm going to, please God, Gabe Davis one time, right? Like, do the 4 touchdown thing again. Are you most likely going to lose that team? Yeah, you are most likely going to lose that team anyway. Every team you draft is most likely to lose. It has a 1 out of 6 chance of making it. Maybe some of them have a little bit higher. Generally speaking, through randomness, you have a 1 out of 6 chance of advancing. So can't be afraid to think these things through and do like I said, I'm personally just going ham on the Niners right now. That's my own specific strategy, but that doesn't mean that's necessarily the correct one. And I will, if it keeps going how I think it's going to keep going, I will probably be pivoting to different teams. I think the Chargers are going to be very high on my list here to start getting every combination of Chargers. Right. And then maybe it's the bye weeks. Maybe the Eagles get the bye and now they become the team I want to start to get overweight on. Right. Obviously, it's fluid while we're drafting during the season. That last week heading into the playoffs, it won't be fluid. Obviously, everything will be locked in, and that's when we can really hone in on what our final strategy is. But it all goes back to how are you actually going to win the tournament? How are you going to win the tournament within the constructs of what is the format, right? Is it 1 out of 6 advance or 2 out of 6 advance? And then how am I going to go about attacking this tournament to win it? Not to advance 2 rounds, to get first out of whatever, 50,000 people. How am I going to do that? Because it's very hard. Even if you nail the Super Bowl, like here's the worst, this is being dramatic. The worst thing that can happen, it's definitely not the worst, but you actually get a team or teams, multiple, through to the final round, and it's just the stone chalk matchup. ADP fell together for all these guys. Everybody was on it, right? Everybody loves the Bills and everybody loves the Cowboys or whatever. Bills, Cowboys in the Super Bowl, and you just have a duped team. You're just duped a million times. Everybody has Josh Allen, Gabe, Pollard, Schultz, and Devin Singletary. I'm just making stuff up, right? Everybody has, those are your 5 guys in the Super Bowl. Everybody has it. You are literally drawing dead, even though you made the Super Bowl. So how do you win it? Right? And the last little thing that can be is, we talked about this also in the Discord, is it can be figuring out ways to get unique within the chalk. Right? Now, that is, in my opinion, typically not the easiest path to winning the tournament, but it doesn't mean I should full on and avoid it. Right. So finding differentiators as your last round pick, 9th round pick, even 8th round pick, within those, your Bills stacks or Cowboy stacks. The Bills are a little bit tougher, but like Khalil Shakir started playing more this week. Right. Who knows? Something happens to Devin Singletary. Maybe Nyheim Hines finally gets a role. No one's rooting for these things, but instead of taking that Bucks player who's not really, he probably won't even help you advance, maybe, but he's definitely not going to help you win the tournament. Their team is just not good enough. Take your Nyheim Hines. Take your, here's one of my favorite ones that I've been drafting, which makes me really sick to my stomach. Take your T.Y. Hilton, right? Take that guy. Take on the Bengals, take Samaje Perine. What if something happens to Joe Mixon? Their Super Bowl odds don't change if Joe Mixon gets hurt. Perine was just as good as Mixon when he played, right? Eli Mitchell. What if Eli Mitchell comes back? And now, if CMC gets hurt, the 49ers playoff odds really will get hurt. But what if Eli Mitchell comes back and has a real role, 12 carries a game or something like that? Maybe he gets some goal line work. I'm not expecting that. That's not my expectation. That's why I have CMC one as my first overall player. But yeah, Rob says 2 more examples. Could Cole Beasley has been active in playing for the Bills lately. Maybe he's the one, they want that guy getting up to speed. Yeah. Yeah. I said T.Y. Hilton, he, in his first game on 2 days of practice, he had 52 receiving yards and could have had another big play if the defense didn't hold him. And all they do keep saying is he's going to keep getting more work and more work and more work. And he doesn't even get drafted in these drafts on a team that everybody loves, the Cowboys. The Cowboys are everybody's favorite NFC team. And he might end up being the absolute wide receiver 3 for the Cowboys with a downfield threat. Like, people draft MVS, people draft whatever. Like, there's tons of guys that get drafted that really I don't see the difference. And that's the point. If you're barfing, literally, I am so happy that we're having this conversation now. If you're barfing about drafting T.Y. Hilton in the 10th round on teams where he makes sense, of course, this isn't regular season best ball. You don't just draft the guy because of that guy. But on the teams where, right, I need another NFC guy, I need another Cowboy. Those could both be true, right? I need something. Don't just take the guy at the top of the ADP list who makes you feel the best, right? It sounds absurd to say take T.Y. Hilton over Chris Godwin, but I would bet the majority of the times that it even is possibly a discussion for most people, right? When they will even consider the fact of being that uncomfortable, then they're just still going to go to the comfort side. And this is totally fine. Kadarius Tony is another great example. Now he goes higher. He's not as quite as off the board, but I agree. Kadarius Tony is the Chiefs version of this. But again, I'm using T.Y. Hilton just because he was fresh on the top of my mind. But this is Terrence, I love you, but this is actually the point. Kadarius Tony is a chess piece on teams where Kadarius Tony is needed. You don't just take the random one guys, right? How do you win this? How are you going to win this tournament? If I don't have any other Chiefs and I don't have a team where Kadarius Tony makes sense, maybe my main stack is only is 3 NFC guys, and with Kadarius Tony as my last round pick, there's no way for him to really help me, right? I can't. There's no Super Bowl matchup. There's nothing where Kadarius Tony fits in. Then I'm not going to take Kadarius Tony, right? It has to all go back to that idea of I need to be able to not only fill out that Super Bowl lineup, right? Which means I need to have 5 players and fill all of the positions. But I also need it to be a team that can win. How am I actually going to win the tournament? I don't win. You don't win shit in this format with like this individual player, right? You win it through this crazy gauntlet that you have to, speaking of gauntlet, no pun intended, through this crazy gauntlet that you have to make your way through. And it's mostly team focused, right? So each team has one of those, not necessarily every team, but I totally agree on Kadarius Tony. But again, it's not one or the other. It's on, and I'm not saying you have to like T.Y. Hilton. Noah Brown goes in more drafts. If you prefer Noah Brown, take Noah Brown. Same difference, but those are the types of names, right? And now those can help you. You should use those guys. That's a lever you should pull in playoff tournaments, but it isn't always right. It's at that point we draft Kadarius Tony. We need Kadarius Tony to actually get on the field now somehow, even though McCole Hardman is coming back. We need Kadarius Tony to get on the field, right? We need T.Y. Hilton, the corpse of T.Y. Hilton, to get on the field more, right? We need Cole Beasley at whatever 30 million years old that he is after not playing for whatever to get on the field a little bit more. And then we need to make the finals. And then we need him to put up a score at low ownership that climbs me to the top. Clearly, that is far more difficult to achieve than a little bit more off the beaten path Super Bowl. So it doesn't mean we should never use that route. It doesn't mean we should never pull that lever. You should pull it all the time. But if you're relying solely upon that, well, I'm just going to draft the Eagles and the Bills and, I'll figure crazy stuff out at the end. I think that is typically not going to be your best strategy. This is a fair question. Now, okay, we went through all that. I'm going to hop in a draft here in a second, but I want to hit some of these questions. Kenny asks, what about the Giants or the Ravens wide receivers? Giants are a little bit tough for me because I think that their odds are really, really long. But your point here is true. Anyone or just about anyone facing the Vikings. Yeah, the Vikings can lose to anybody. So the Giants could be that team. I think that's interesting. I think that we'll be discussing that quite a bit more when we have a little bit more clarity. But you can take shots at the teams who might be facing them, right? Giants, Washington, etc. And I think that's reasonable. I do prefer, to the part of your question, I don't know about Ravens wide receivers. I really like J.K. Dobbins for this question. The Ravens are in the playoffs, basically. I believe it's let me just double check that it's a lock. I do forget frequently of yeah, they're in the playoffs. Not a super exciting team fantasy wise. The offense has been terrible. Obviously, Lamar has been banged up. We'll see what's up with Lamar. But if we assume Lamar comes back, can the Ravens, Lamar, Dobbins, Mark Andrews, these dusty wide receivers, but a pretty good defense, could they win a game? Could they win 2? I think so. So I kind of like the Ravens a little bit. But again, those are guys that I'm cycling through. Like you said, he's the type of guy that kills you one way or another. I hate the variance, but I take him or Palmer as insurance. I assume Tony. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it just, again, Palmer fits on teams that Palmer fits on, right? If I have my Charger stack, I absolutely draft Josh Palmer as like, okay, this team has built for a Charger Super Bowl. Josh Palmer can be a last round piece, or a late round piece that's critical for that, right? I'm not taking T.Y. Hilton over Josh Palmer on those teams. I'm not even taking Kadarius Tony over Josh Palmer on those teams because I need Josh Palmer to be successful given the team that I've built way more than I need Kadarius Tony. And so it's just kind of all about using these players as chess pieces to lead you through this gauntlet. And it's not so much more about the team that they play for, but it is so much about the team that they play for. Yeah, this is a very fair comment from Johnny Footballs. Wait, the Ravens have wide receivers. I mean, to at least be fair to the point about the Ravens wide receivers, Demarcus Robinson has been low-key, like, not bad for fantasy. You have to expect to be better if Lamar comes back. I mean, we're sitting here talking about a Chiefs wide receiver who plays like 3 snaps and hasn't had a healthy hamstring in 2 years. And we're talking about a wide receiver who hasn't played in a year and is 33 or whatever. Like, I don't see how we can talk shit on Demarcus Robinson if we're talking about some of these other guys. Cool on 2K asks, good question. Are you going 5 NFC and 5 AFC, or is that too much? I feel like in this format, you need to be extreme. You definitely need to be extreme. Good question. I know I kind of kicked it off with that. We don't have to talk about exactly how many players to take from here, but this is a legit good question because I don't want to be rigid to any of this. You have to be flexible in your draft, and we'll probably see this when we do a draft here in a second. The drafts, as Paul said at the top, are unforgiving. You don't get to set out and say, I'm going to draft this amount of teams from this conference, or this amount of players from this conference, this amount of players from this team, whatever. You don't really get to do that because a lot of times the ADP doesn't fall that way. The first draft I did this morning, I set out to stack the 49ers. I'm aligned perfectly. Actually, I was going to reach a little bit for Brock Purdy, and someone else took him. Someone else took him. Now I got these 3 49ers, and I was set to, I had a set plan going into it. Draft didn't give it to me. So now you got to pivot. I think I pivoted to Chargers or something like that on that team. Now you got to pivot. But then, right? So then I pivot. I get Herbert, Mike Williams. I'm probably going to get another Josh Palmer, right? You can take Gerald Everett, even though he clearly has disappeared. Keenan, I think, was gone. Keenan Allen was gone by this point. Austin Eckler was gone by this point, right? But you adapt. And so sometimes it's going to be very, very different than other times. I think the biggest thing is more so about, okay, how many do I need on kind of the main team that I'm stacking? And then how do I, based on that, then how do I play out the rest of my lineup, right? I think, again, generally speaking, it does not have to be this way. I like to have the 4 guys, including the quarterback, on my main team, right? So using that 49ers example, I take CMC, I take Kittle and Ayuk and Purdy. So now what's also really nice about that is I have my running back position covered and my quarterback position covered on the team. I've placed my chips on the 49ers, right? Based on this team that I drafted, the 49ers got to make the Super Bowl. And like I said, what's awesome about them is I can cover the quarterback and the running back. you technically can cover, both wide receiver positions too. So I'm probably only going to draft if I have it my way, I'm only going to draft those 4 players from the NFC. See, San Francisco is leading me to the promised land on the NFC side. Now, by doing that, I get kind of this I get this extreme flexibility on the AFC side. Again, if I could pick like just one, if I could only build teams in one exact way, I still believe that it would be that, like 4 from, say, the NFC with 3 different pairs of 2 players on the other side from 3 different teams. So what that does is it gives me multiple outs, right, to finding the Gabe Davis game. If you just draft, right, if I draft 5 49ers and 5 Chargers, I'm setting up for the Super Bowl, great. Right? If that's the Super Bowl, sure. And we want to play for that Super Bowl, but we have to, as was mentioned in the comment before, we have to thread this needle. And it doesn't have to be, I'm all in literally only on 2 teams. I get a lot of those benefits through something like a 4-2-2-2, right? 4 49ers, 2 Bills, 2 Chargers, 2 Ravens. Now I have 3 different win conditions. Right? Obviously, the 49ers have to be one, but now I have 3 of the playoff teams in the AFC, likely with some of their good players. A couple of them are lower probability, right? Chargers and Ravens are a little lower. They're my Bengals of last year. And then I have the chalkier option, right? I don't have Stephon Diggs or Josh Allen on that team, but maybe I have Gabe, or I have Singletary or Cook, or the losers at the back of the draft, like we talked about with Crowder and Beasley and, Dawson Knox, right? There's cycling through those is what I think I prefer. Now, you can also do that with like 4-3-3. You could 4-4-2, right? And so that's why I don't like to make it like cookie cutter like that. And again, every draft is going to be different. I can say I want 4-2-2-2, but I take X player and I think I'm going to take another player from his team, but once I get to the 7th round, it doesn't make sense for me to do that anymore. And sometimes maybe you do want to have that second quarterback with a Brock Purdy, right? Something like that. That changes up your roster construction. And so hopefully that helped. I think it's very difficult to kind of describe that whole element because people want, not you, Cool on 2K, who asked the question. I think it's just hard to like give, like you want to have that, tell me how many, right? It's one thing to be like, tell me how many quarterbacks and running backs and stuff to draft, which the answer is there's definitely not a rule for that. I don't even want to like dive into that because it's way more about the teams that you draft, right? And the conferences that you draft than it is about positions other than quarterback. But people want to be like, so how many on my main stack do I draft? It's like, well, could be 3. I think you probably always want 3, I would say, but like 3, 4, 5, 6. I think there's different ways that it's viable in lots of different, ways to construct it. And then I mentioned like the 4-2-2-2. You could do 4-3-1-1-1. You could do 4-2-2-1-1, right? Because as long as you have 4 on one side and 1 from that opponent on the other, you can fill out a Super Bowl roster. Is it probably exactly what you were hoping for in a Super Bowl roster? Not necessarily, but you can still do it in smart ways where you're creating some of those unique combinations. And so it's such a fun conversation, but you can see it takes a lot of different thoughts to iron out because none of this, there's really no right or wrong answer. The only wrong answer is drafting a team that has no chance to win, right? You drafted no way to have 5 players live in the Super Bowl, or you drafted no way to have 5 players live in the first round. Those kinds of things, those are about the only ways to go wrong, right? Technically, even if I just said, I'm just only going to take Burrow and Chase from the Bengals, and then I'm going to get 3 49ers and 3, technically, That's okay. I think it's a tougher way to win, but technically it's not wrong, and I think we don't want to be talking about right or wrong, other than as long as you're not the guy paying the rake. Let's see. Johnny Footballs, I just disagree with how they literally don't even try to get Lamar any elite wide receivers. Amen to that. We see what happens when you rely only upon Rashad Bateman. Johnny also says, I like taking Josh Kelly. Yeah, another awesome example. I like taking Josh Kelly as a late round flyer on my Charger stacks, especially if I get sniped on Eckler, but also because it looked like Eckler got hurt on his last snap. You never know. The only counter I would say with these ones is, so like I like the Pirine one a lot better than the Josh Kelly one. And it actually doesn't have anything to do with those specific like players or teams or whatever. I guess it kind of does. If we remove the win condition on Josh Kelly is Eckler being hurt, basically. Not totally, he plays a little bit if you luck box a touchdown. That's good. But to really win with him, Eckler needs to get hurt. The problem with that win condition is that if Eckler gets hurt, that's really bad for the Chargers. Really, really bad. So you've now created a situation where in order for that player to be valuable, you need to hurt the team that you're drafting, right? And you don't want to hurt the teams that you're drafting for. You want the teams that you're drafting for to win and be at their best. And I do think the Chargers are really coming on strong down the stretch. They're getting healthier. The defense is playing better. They're second in DVOA over like the last month on defense. If they get Bosa back, etc. I'm pretty excited about the Chargers, but I don't think you want to go out of your way to build for situations that are actively hurting the stack that you're building, if that makes sense. And then before we hop in a draft, Paul says, as we mentioned in the Discord, these contests are the largest they've been, so we don't know exactly what will work yet. Exactly. That's why, I spent a lot of time probably saying what some people might think is, a lot of nothing, but that's actually the point. The point is you may have something that is totally viable, can absolutely win this thing, that is different than how I'm going to approach them. And that's good, actually, because this game is not solved. If you wanted to say, I'm going to, hunt a bunch of one-offs, as long as I'm going to lots of 5-1-1-1-1-1-1 teams. If you wanted to say that that's how you're going to do it, I'm not going to argue with you. It's not how I'm building my teams, but I think it's totally fine. And so we don't know what works in these, but we can identify ways to think about the contest and ways to come up with the strategies that we want to implement and test them and try them out. We only get to do it once a year, and probably not going to work, but that's okay. The fun is in the journey, right? That's what we tell ourselves when we run bad in best ball. All right, I'm hopping in a mitten 2. Needs 5. Need 5 people to fill this mitten. Let me zoom. Johnny says, seeing how in the Super Bowl you'll only be using one QB score and one RB score, I think it's smart to be heavier on one elite QB with a stack, one elite RB, and bringing it back with all alpha. Well, shit, yeah. Show me how you can get that. I agree. That sounds awesome. I would love to have a bunch of teams that have the best quarterback, the best running back, and alpha wide receivers. That would be awesome. I'm down for that. I need to send my I did I think this only has my 4 way too early. I did 4. You see, which if you're not using the browser extension, playoff best ball is going to be probably the best time to use it. You can see your exposure to individual players. Obviously, you can see your exposure to stacks with said player and exposure to teams with that player, right? So once you draft Josh Allen, you can see, okay, on my Josh Allen teams, how much exposure do I have to all of these other players in real time as you draft? I've got like 15 mitten 2s on the books so far. I forgot to send those. I forgot to send those too. But yeah, the tool is killer. This overlay, and you get it by being a Spike Week subscriber. $24.98 a month, and you can get obviously get access to all the other tools: Draft IQ, Sweat IQ, ADP tools, premium content, rankings, all that different stuff comes with the subscription. But when we're in the heart of drafting season, like I can't draft without this overlay anymore, and it all comes through the premium browser extension. And there's a link to Spike Week Premium in the description as well. All right, looks like you guys stole my CMC 101 here, so that's not great. And Jesus Christ, this is literally the opposite of where I want to be. Let me think about this. I am going to do the Bills do not get the bye. We're going to do a Bills, no bye for the Bills. Paul setting up the Cowboys. I'm sorry, I won't try to give away everybody's. What the hell just happened? My mouse just broke. If I set up for... All right, we're going to try it. We're going to try an Eagles team. I sat here the whole time being like, I love the 49ers. And yesterday I was talking about that. I kind of don't love the Eagles, but I want to, I still want to see what an Eagles team looks like. Holy shit. Josh Dobbs is starting for the Titans tonight, not Malik Willis. Literally just got that news as we're talking. Oh, 100% the worst to stream. Not only because they're really like kind of chaotic generally. Like, God, I couldn't agree more with this. Terrence says the playoff drafts are the worst to stream. And it's two-part. They're so chaotic. It's like kind of, you're trying to follow what other people are doing while talking. But then you really do have to kind of think hard sometimes about like what this picking fifth. I would take Jamar Chase. Picking fifth, if Jamar Chase were there, I would have taken him. So now I'm pressed with which route do I go? And then same thing on the next pick. Like, well, I don't really want Travis Kelce. I have Justin Jefferson a lot lower than market. Those kinds of things. Like, now what do I do that I took this bill? And then, it's very difficult to do the thinking on the spot. And then I want Devonta Smith. He goes. So no Devonta Smith. No. All right, we're gonna build a little Eagles stack with Diggs on the other side. Take Miles. Okay. Gonna have Eagles. Bills are not getting the bye, we said. So we're gonna go Gabe here. Got Miles. So I am probably going to need another quarterback and another running back with the Eagles. If you wanted to play it out and say, look, the Eagles are not a lock for the bye, it is only 95%. You're like, well, it's only 95%. So technically I could draft the solo Hurts team. I think 95% is a high enough probability to assume that they're going to get it. And so I'm going to build as though they get the bye. But like I said, I am also building as though the Bills do not. They're only 46%. The Chiefs should fairly easily win. Definitely this week should kind of easily win out. And then like the Bills get the Bengals this week. And I've talked about how high I am on the Bengals. So yeah, this is also a good point. If you are watching this, multiple days after it goes, or you have been drafting already, Hurts is really falling. And so I was thinking about this morning. I hadn't been drafting like any Eagles almost, and definitely not Hurts. And so it just so happens that now he's falling. Like it was the top three was Allen, Mahomes, Hurts. CMC went fourth. Now you kind of see CMC's already passed Hurts in ADP, but then he kind of goes all over the board a little bit more. People want him. And and Hurts is falling. I think both with the injury, and so by the time anybody watches this that's not watching it live, you may see a very different ADP for Jalen Hurts. Yeah, this is a great point by Paul. Journey being able to push Burrow to round 4. Burrow typically goes in round 2. Anywhere, kind of all over round 2. Depending upon the kind of room you're in, right? You'll get in rooms where some people are just strictly focused on the correlation and all that, and then you'll get in rooms that are the opposite. But yeah, that's pretty sweet. If I had not see, and so here's what Joe Burrow is my favorite quarterback to draft in all of these drafts. He's our core pick on spikeweek.com at quarterback. But like I took Stephon Diggs in the first round, I didn't want to then make my primary stack an AFC stack, right? So now you go, okay, well, let's do the Hurts thing. I have my Bills. I'm going to put Singletary on there. Cousins is interesting. I'm going to take Singletary, though. See? And so here, I think Singletary was just the best choice, but it doesn't fit. I mentioned that my preference, right, would be 4-2-2-2. But I can't stick to that when Travis Etienne, Paul, I love it. I can't stick to that when the draft that I'm in doesn't play itself out that way. Where is see, the AFC is just brutal right here, man. Here's what we're going to do. Minor pivot. Bills are going to be on one side. Eagles and probably 49ers on the other side. We're sticking to those 3 teams on this team, I think. Yeah, Travis says when the recreational players take a third quarterback, it's so tilting. Sometimes I get pissed when they take a second. Nonetheless, a third is like, good Lord. Yeah, Kenny says with only one team advancing round 1, picking the right player for round 1 is so important. It is, but it's also completely impossible. So it's one of those things that is a thing. It matters, but you can't predict it at all. So I don't know if you guys play DFS baseball or do anything with baseball. I always think of this example when we talk about these kinds of things. It's like BVP, batter versus pitcher, right? I think any human being with a brain knows that certain hitters are going to hit better off of certain pitchers. The problem is there is no data. There's no way that we can predict when we know that to be true. You may think, right, this guy's batting 500 off of this pitcher with 4 home runs. He owns him. It's like, you don't know that. You think you know that, but that's not really how data works. You don't know that. And so it's one of these where it's like, I know that BBP is real. I know that I need to hit on guys in round 1 that go off, but I know that I can't predict it. I don't know who it's going to be. So you just draft and pray. Draft and pray. Okalani says, do you think it's worth it to do a super stack with the Bills and take the risk they don't get the bye? Feel like if the Chiefs lock down the bye, a lot of teams will be dead 2 ways. Yes, 100%. If I were building Bills teams right now, I would be building for them not to get the bye. Do you maybe donate some money? They're like a coin flip to get it. So it's certainly possible that they get it and you lose that money, right? With solo Josh Allen teams or whatever. But can't, no risk it, no biscuit, baby. You either are going to ship everything or lose those dollars. Guess what? I said this earlier. You were probably going to lose those dollars anyway. If you don't want to lose them, don't play this contest. If you want to play the contest, play it to win. All right, let me think about this now. Okay, yeah. So look at all these Bills. You see, obviously the Bills are highlighted because I have Bills on here. Yeah, apparently I'm just really going to be smashing a ton of Bills here. I really want Dawson Knox. So we're flipping this into just a god-awful team that I don't really like. I was hoping somehow we'd get a little Purdy action here. But what we're going to try to do is backdoor an Eagles-Bills Super Bowl. I love that Jimmy G is what we're going to try to do is backdoor an Eagles-Bills Super Bowl, and we're going to use Trevor Lawrence to do so. So we take Lawrence. Lawrence is going to be my first round quarterback, or first round, of the NFL playoffs quarterback, and play for, obviously the Jags they don't technically need to win that game. I know that this team is willing to punt off 2 spots, right? But I'm punting off those 2 spots to get, I'm a little annoyed with the Kittle pick now, but that's how it goes, right? I'm kind of happy that this draft happened because it has not gone how I would want the draft to go. But you can see, like, even when you make mistakes, or when the draft doesn't fall to you appropriately, you can still build a way that gives you a chance to win the tournament, right? I said, look, this draft has not gone really kind of how I wanted it. So we took Diggs and we said the Bills aren't going to get the bye. Then we took Hurts and we said, okay, the Eagles are going to get the bye, but it's Eagles-Bills Super Bowl. How do I get an Eagles-Bills Super Bowl team through, right? Well, Kittle's one of the higher upside guys, that you can take in his range. All of the Bills have high upside. Now what do I do? To get that team through, right? Well, obviously I need another quarterback. If Lawrence is going to go nuts, I'm going to need another Jags wide receiver. Then I have that 10th pick, probably another Eagle, but we'll see once it gets here. Yeah, see, this is what I'm telling you. You took Dawson Knox over Tyreek. That can never be right. I'm sorry, my brain won't allow such things. I don't think that this format is for you then. If you can't take Dawson Knox over Tyreek Hill, I don't even care about Tyreek Hill on this team. Why would I ever take Tyreek Hill on this team? There's no reason. You know what I'm saying? That's the perfect example of, God damn, I guess I got it. Zay or Ingram? I have not been faced with this decision yet. You know what? We're going to take Evan Ingram. There's a fun one. Yeah. This is not regular season best ball. We'll talk about it in a second once again. I don't know. All right. And then we're going to get a long Quez touchdown in the championship round to close out the Eagles six. Like right there, I just took Quez over Dalton Schultz and J.K. Dobbins and Kadarius Tony. It's like, because that is what requires that team to win this tournament, right? As Kalani says, Miami's not a lock to make the playoffs, and they're really in a lot of trouble actually with Tua. Right, I already have Kittle, but that was because I was trying to set up 49ers. I'm glad this is such a good conversation. Tyreek, I need the Bills to make the Super Bowl, and I did at that point only had 2 Eagles, so I needed Bills. I have bet on the Bills. I took Kittle because my plan was to actually try to use Purdy as my second quarterback, and maybe see if Ayuk would fall to me. Neither of those things happened, so you have to react on the fly. And I said, all right, now instead of going for the 49ers, right, this kind of awkward 49ers Eagles NFC championship against the Bills, you just press your bet on the Bills. Like the one-off, like the one-off player where he just looks better than the other player. Again, you don't make any money really doing it that way. You know what I mean? You might have a slightly better chance of advancing. But hey, like I said, the Dolphins are kind of in trouble to make the playoffs. Let me see what the current odds are. They are only 59% to even make the playoffs, and I don't believe that is probably accounting for old Tua being out. Meanwhile, the teams that I stacked are the Eagles are 22% to win the Super Bowl. The Bills are 20% to win the Super Bowl, right? I tried to mix in the 49ers. It didn't work. That's okay. But you don't then say, oh, well, I took Kittle, so I might as well now just deviate from my plan even further. This is another great point that piggybacks on this. ADP is completely useless in this. If the Super Bowl is Ravens and Cowboys, those are the only teams that matter, and none of those players are in the top 6 picks. 100%. Tyreek projects better this week than Dawson Knox, of course. And if we were playing a 1-week game, I would never, ever, 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 ever take Dawson Knox over Tyreek Hill. If we're playing a regular season best ball, this is not regular season best ball. This is I'm trying to get myself the Super Bowl matchup and this path to this Super Bowl matchup. I mixed in Kittle because I thought I could get cute, right? Because I took the Eagles. I wanted to see if I could, okay, now let's build in my other 49ers, because the 49ers are also a really high probability advancing team, right? Versus the Dolphins are not even all that high probability of a make the playoffs team. And if they lose this week, they'll be a dog to make the playoffs. So Knox is definitely not available in the last round of these drafts. I don't know what his average ADP is. I can look really quick. I just recommend doing some of these drafts, Terrence. That's what I'll. We don't got to keep laboring the point, but Knox's ADP is 47. Knox's ADP is 47. Let's see. Brent said, I don't like the number 1 pick. I had to take CMC. Everyone's going Allen. Well, here, I'll share my like exposures and such to show you how I feel about old CMC. Where is so 14? I lied. 14 mitten 2 teams. I guess I can just do exposure because it includes the way too early wild card. I have 40 CMC, Schultz. See, so this is kind of where you're seeing what I was saying earlier before play out for my teams. Taking tons of CMC just about every time I can get my hands on them. You don't see a lot of Hurts or Josh Allen or Mahomes up here in my quarterbacks. You see Herbert and Burrow. So on the AFC side, I've been placing a lot of bets on the Chargers and Bengals. Obviously, I have a little bit more Chargers because they're a little bit easier to get. But then you see 49ers, right? McCaffrey, Kittle, Ayuk up here. But there's Josh Palmer, right? Hayden Hurst. Hayden Hurst is a good one, a late round guy for the Bengals. Quez, got Quez back there. Tony, Juwan Jennings from the Niners, right? You need a last round guy from the Niners. Take that, et cetera, et cetera. Lots of CMC. Miles. There's P. Ryan, right? Singletary, Eckler, kind of as you would expect. But I have been hammering CMC anytime I can take them. Maybe that will change if ADP changes, but as of right now, it's kind of my plan. Shout out Brent. And I like this. I'm really going to be Lobby CDQ says I have over 40% Mahomes. I'm really fascinated to see how the whole thing plays out with those quarterbacks, right? I mean, we'll know a lot more Monday night, assuming that the Chiefs win. We'll know a lot more about the Mahomes versus Allen thing in the AFC. And next week when we do another one of these shows, it'll be probably a different conversation. But I like this. I like the stance. I really like the stance. God, this went longer than this. We can talk about playoff best ball. It's like you think it'd be so simple. It's like, oh, hey, dummy, just get to the Super Bowl. You think it'd be so simple? My Lord. This was supposed to be like basic getting started into playoff best ball, and we're just spending an hour and a half talking about it. But I'm going to get out of here. We'll be back tonight. Pivoting back away from the playoff best ball stuff. I promise tons more. We're going to have drafter shows. We're going to have DraftKings shows. We're going to have, I got another article coming up here soon. I got an article from Silas coming out here this afternoon. We got rankings out, right? We're going to have top stacks and core picks and some different roster construction ideas, similar to what we talked about here today. Some ways to build maybe some unique rosters. Tons and tons and tons of different playoff best ball content, both on YouTube and on the website. Of course, if you prefer the audio feed, check in the description. There's a link to the podcast feed. Every show that goes up on YouTube is put on the podcast feed. this afternoon / early evening, myself and Rob Coakley, we will be back. We're diving back into, right, a few days left of week 17. Week 17 kicks off tonight with, my God, what a shit show of a game. No big dog, no Derrick Henry. Malik Willis isn't even starting. We may not get Tony Pollard. Just a mess. Week 17, what a mess. But lots of money to be won. You guys made the finals. I was lucky enough to make the finals in a few different spots. So was Rob. So we are going to get back onto week 17, start to preview, obviously, tonight's game, but the weekend of games, maybe some of what, advance rates and exposures and everything look like in the finals of these best ball playoffs. So for my dogs, for you guys, for Underdog and their wonderful playoff best ball contests,